In the name of the one living God who was and is to come. Amen. If you just decided to come to church this morning just because it's Sunday, then God bless you. The church could use more of you. And if you're one of us church nerds who came this morning in the full knowledge and expectation of the fact that this is the first Sunday of Advent, the first Sunday of the new church year, then God bless you too. Those of you in that second category are undoubtedly aware that when you overlay the ancient traditions of the church year on top of the contemporary calendar in which we all live, you end up with some strange collisions. For example, every few years here at St. Paul's, Pentecost Sunday coincides with UVA graduation, in which we have depressed attendance and depressed attention on one of our great feast days. And if you're a basketball fan, then you are familiar with the distressing dissonance between the great festival of March Madness and the somber tone of Lent. And in particularly accursed years, the conflict between the national semifinals and the Easter Vigil. Now, for those of you who like to prepare ahead, here's early notice of another conflict on the horizon. Ash Wednesday 2024 falls again, as it occasionally does, on the 14th of February. Happy Valentine's Day, my love, and remember that you are dust. Now, Advent doesn't just sometimes conflict, but always conflicts with what we know far and wide as the holiday season. And as sure as the sun will come up tomorrow, we are in not only for a barrage of holiday marketing, but also the equally reliable annual onslaught of churchy exhortations to just slow down, quiet our hearts and minds, and embrace the quiet, meditative spirit of Advent, which is easier said than done. And I know because I just said it, and I'm not sure I've ever really done it. So if you also have trouble slowing down, quieting the heart and mind, it's worth remembering that the tradition of the church year does not exist for the purpose of scolding us into the proper mindset for the proper calendar dates. It exists as a tool to manage our attention, to invite our focus, to move over the course of a year from one marvelous, mysterious aspect of God's presence and activity to another. Not because God's activity is beholden to the calendar, but because in the context of our smallness and God's vastness, we are incapable of holding it all together in our hearts and minds at one time. Christmas draws our attention to the loving presence of God within humankind. But for the church throughout the world, or when we look at the wider communities in which we live, our families, our friends, the larger circles of civic life, it's always Christmas, as it is today, wherever God is showing up unexpectedly, unaccountably, in unlikely circumstances, whether in the form of a new baby, a loving friend, a generous stranger. Good Friday calls our attention year after year to the scandal of violence, hatred, and injustice, but it is always Good Friday, as it is today wherever the forces of cruelty, oppression, and bloodlust have their day. And Easter is about resurrection, but it's always Easter, wherever human hearts, despite intimate knowledge of the worst humankind can do, are persuaded that the God of love and the love of God still reign, that though the capacity of humankind to do evil is immense, it is eternally overmatched by the resurrection life of the God who is love. So what is it that Advent is intended to draw our attention to? Surely there's more to Advent than just exhortations against commercialism or the insistence that it's not Christmas. One possibility is that Advent is a time to focus on the mysteries of the activity of a timeless God in our time-bound lives, and therefore to meditate on the mystery of time itself. And if that's the case, then the countervailing cultural force to Advent spirituality, the calendar conflict, if you will, is not so much the commercialism of the holiday season, which, if you think about it, is not really so much more commercial than the economic air that we all breathe the rest of the year, but sentimentality. And speaking as one who has been known to tear up at a holiday season Chevrolet commercial, I know how powerful sentimentality can be. I'm not suggesting it's easy to overcome. I'm not even suggesting it's entirely a negative phenomenon. What I'm suggesting is that sentimentality can tempt us to identify and then to prioritize God's activity in the past, and particularly in our own personal past. And it is important to know where God has been in your past. And yes, when God showed up in your life in the form of a person who used to be there at Christmas dinner and will not be there, that is a powerful thing. But Advent's call is to watch and wait for what God will do next, which is the heart of Advent spirituality. And that can be an antidote to sentimentality. It can right the balance between our past and God's future. It can challenge us to be as invested in the latter as we are in the former. The lessons assigned for today remind us that to live with God is to be in both times at once. We are the people to whom God has come. We are the people with whom God dwells, and we are also the people who walk in darkness. Last year on the first Sunday of Advent, I was in Children's Chapel. And so I had one child crouch between the pews, and I had another one stand by the chapel door, close her eyes, and walk backwards up the aisle. And I told the child crouching in the pew, I whispered, "When she gets to you, surprise her." Because that is actually how we move through life. We love to give ourselves and others credit for foresight, for looking into the future, for reading the horizon. But in fact, with every passing day and with every step we take, we are walking backwards into an unknown, and what we see in great detail, the scene that we scan, the circumstances that we take in, the clues that we pick up on, the patterns we identify, the basis on which we make decisions are all in the past, because that is all that we can see. I was well into the thick of adulthood with a whole upbringing in the church and years of adult engagement in the life of the church before it dawned on me that Advent is not about knowing what's coming. It is precisely about not knowing what's coming. We are the people walking in darkness praying, "Come, O come, Emmanuel." Why do we light these candles, if not for the fact that we understand ourselves to be in the darkness? So the challenge that Christmas can pose to Advent does not lie so much in overrunning us with commercialism as it does in tempting us to believe that we know what's coming, that the baby will be born, we will sing carols, family will gather. But notice, though those things probably will happen, notice how much of that is actually rooted in the past. And when we put too much of our hearts and minds and attention there, it can insulate us from being startled. Being startled like Mary with the utterly unpredictable, unprecedented activity of God, doing the thing that we never imagined God would do, the thing that can break us apart from our past and invite us fully into God's future. Are we willing to orient ourselves to God's future in such a way that when God does the thing we never could have imagined, we are able to say with Mary, "Here I am, let it be with me according to your word"? Or will we be left behind looking another direction, gazing at our own past? The past that we can see as we inch backwards into that unknown future is illuminated by the light of God, but it is shining from behind, drawing us into the future. And we see the long stretch of our forebears that led up to us. We had a beautiful representation of this in the Eucharistic prayer we used at the last several weeks, the last part of the season after Pentecost. It was from the Church of Southern Africa, and it described sharing the cup of our humanity matured over the unnumbered centuries of the long struggle that has gone into the making of this world. That struggle that we see as we walk backwards looking at the past is our own shadow, because the light of God is in the future behind us, drawing us ahead. God, we trust that you are there in our future. And we trust that when we can't see you there, that in the words of the hymn, it is only the splendor of light hideth thee. Amen.